Mila stood quietly in the corner of the grand dining room, the aroma of jollof rice and grilled chicken filling the air. The long table was decorated with golden plates, expensive cutlery, and loud laughter. Her cousin Terra sat at the head like a king, surrounded by family members and guests dressed in the finest clothes. Mila had spent the whole day cooking, cleaning, and setting the table, but when she tried to sit down, Tara's voice cut through the room like a knife. "You? Sit here?" he scoffed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "This table is for family, real family, not someone whose mother ran off and married a broke nobody." The room went silent, then exploded with laughter. Some people shook their heads in fake pity. Others giggled behind their wine glasses. Mila's hands shook slightly, but she said nothing. She simply lowered her eyes and stepped back. She didn't fight. She didn't cry. But inside, something burned. Not anger, not sadness, something deeper. Her chest rose and fell slowly, like someone waiting for the right moment. They thought she was weak. They thought silence meant shame. But if they had looked closer, they would have seen it. The fire in her eyes. The kind of fire that doesn't scream, but plans. That night, they saw a poor girl in worn slippers, quietly walking away from their table. But what they didn't know was that Mila wasn't walking away in defeat. She was walking away with a secret that would shake the ground they were laughing on. The same table they mocked her at, she'd soon own it. The same house they told her she didn't belong in, it already had her name on it, and no one saw it coming. Mila's life wasn't always filled with fine clothes and golden chandeliers. In fact, her journey started on a cold, hard floor. As a little girl, she used to sleep on thin mats that barely covered the dusty ground. When it rained, water would leak through the holes in the roof and drip onto her face at night. She didn't have toys or soft pillows. Her home was a small one-room space with mud walls and a rusted tin door. Every morning before the sun rose, Mila would carry firewood on her head through long, rough paths, just to help her mother cook something small for breakfast. Some days, they didn't eat at all. Other kids laughed at her torn clothes and bare feet, but Mila kept going, her eyes always fixed on something greater. At school, while others joked or gave up, Mila stayed back, writing her notes under the dying light of the street lamp. She didn't have electricity at home, so she would sit outside with mosquitoes biting her legs just to finish her homework. Teachers saw her as quiet but brilliant. She didn't talk much, but her results always spoke loudly. Top of the class, every term. Nobody understood how a girl with so little could shine so brightly. But what no one knew was that someone had been watching from afar. Her late grandfather. He was a rich, respected man in Odomer Hills. But many believed he didn't care for Mila because of how her mother was treated in the family. But secretly, he admired Mila deeply. He saw her strength, her fire, her refusal to give up. Even though she had no money, he noticed that she had something more powerful, grit. He never showed it when others were around, but he often asked his old friend Elio about her progress. Sometimes he would pass by her school in his black Jeep, just to catch a glimpse of her from a distance. Before he died, her grandfather did something no one expected. He put aside documents, a special will, a secret gift, something that would change Mila's life forever. He didn't trust the rest of the family, especially not Tare, who only cared about image and wealth. But Mila, she had heart. And he knew heart was stronger than gold, hidden in a room no one had entered in years, locked away from greedy eyes, was the key to Mila's future. While the rest of the family celebrated their riches, Mila was fighting for her survival with nothing but books and hope. She didn't know her life would change so drastically. All she knew was that she had to keep pushing, keep believing, even when the world pushed her down. From dusty roads to crowded classrooms, from hunger to hidden blessings, Mila's story was already being written in silence. The girl who once had nothing was being prepared for everything, and one day she would walk through the same mansion she was once kept out of, not as a guest, not as a servant, but as the owner. The girl who slept on mats would soon own the mansion, and the world wasn't ready for it. Days after the embarrassing dinner where Mila was pushed aside, Elio asked to see her privately. He looked at her with serious eyes, the kind that held heavy secrets. Mila followed him through the long hallway of the mansion, past dusty pictures and locked doors. He stopped in front of one old wooden door at the far end. It was different, older, stronger, and sealed with a padlock. Elio pulled out a small key from his pocket, his hands slightly shaking. "Your grandfather asked me to give this to you," he said quietly. Mila was confused. What was behind this door? The lock clicked open, and Elio pushed the door slowly. The room was dark at first, filled with cobwebs and the smell of old wood and secrets. But when they turned on the light, Mila gasped. Inside were shelves lined with books, files, and boxes. A large table stood in the middle, and on it, a brown envelope with her name written in her grandfather's handwriting. She picked it up with trembling hands. Inside the envelope were documents, real, official documents. Her grandfather's will, signed and sealed, bank statements showing huge amounts of money saved in accounts. And then the biggest shock, property papers. The mansion they were all living in, the same one where she was insulted and told to serve food, was legally in her name. Her name was printed clearly on the ownership deed. Mila Temitope Okafor, legal owner. Her legs went weak. She sat down, her heart beating fast. "Elio, what is this?" she whispered. Elio smiled gently. "Your grandfather believed in you more than anyone else. He saw how hard you worked. He knew you had strength and wisdom far beyond your years. He didn't want the rest of the family to ruin what he built, especially Terra, so he left everything to you. But he told me not to give it to you until you were ready, until they showed you who they really were." Tears filled Mila's eyes. All her life, she had felt unwanted in that house. They treated her like she didn't matter, like she was just a helper. But now, she was the real heir. The mansion wasn't Tare's. It wasn't theirs. It was hers. Her grandfather had been watching, even when he said nothing. He saw her walking barefoot, studying under streetlights, helping her mother. He saw her courage. Mila looked around the room. There were even photo frames of her as a little girl, pictures she didn't know he had kept, notes in his handwriting. "Mila will rise. Protect her. She is the future." Her heart broke and healed at the same time. Everything suddenly made sense. The way he used to stare at her quietly, the way he treated her mother kindly when no one else did. He wasn't blind to the pain she went through. He was preparing her for something bigger. In that hidden room, surrounded by papers, old memories and truth, Mila found her power. She wasn't just a poor girl from nowhere. She was the chosen one, the real owner. And now, it was time for everyone else to find out. The house was buzzing with activity. Terra was planning a big party to impress his rich friends and business partners. He wanted everyone to see him as the new king of the mansion, the man in charge. Decorations were going up, food was being ordered, and expensive drinks were delivered in boxes. He walked around giving instructions like he owned the world. But there was one instruction that hit Mila the hardest. He looked her dead in the eye and said, "Stay in the kitchen. Cook what I told you and don't come out. This party is not for you." Mila didn't argue. She didn't even blink. She nodded quietly and walked away, her heart heavy, but her face calm. In the kitchen, she chopped onions with tears in her eyes, but not because of the onions. She remembered how many times she had helped her grandfather cook in that same kitchen, how they used to laugh while preparing pepper soup. And now, she was being treated like she didn't even belong. In the house that was legally hers. In the same house her grandfather had built from the ground up. A house that held her childhood, her struggles, and her dreams. As she stirred the soup and set the meat aside, she could hear music playing from the backyard. Laughter, clinking glasses, and loud voices filled the air. She peeked through the window and saw Terra boasting to the guests, telling them how hard he worked to maintain his late grandfather's legacy. Mila smiled to herself, not a bitter smile, a knowing one. She knew something Terra didn't. She wasn't just cooking food that night. She was cooking a surprise that would change everything. The table he was showing off? Her grandfather had built it by hand. The same table where she used to sit as a little girl, listening to family stories, dreaming of a better life. Now, she wasn't even allowed to sit at it, but she didn't need to beg for a seat anymore, because the truth was already in her hands. She wore her grandmother's necklace that night under her apron. It was a reminder of the strong women who came before her, women who didn't fight with noise, but with dignity. As she finished the last dish and wiped her hands, her heart beat faster, not with fear, but with power. Her moment was coming. While the party continued outside, Mila went upstairs quietly. She opened the same hidden room where Elio had shown her the truth. She pulled out the envelope with the property deed and the will. She checked everything twice. It was all there. Her name, her right, her proof. Downstairs, people were dancing, taking pictures, and making toasts. Terra stood at the center like a peacock, proud and arrogant. "This house means everything to me," he shouted. "It's mine now, and I'll protect it with all I have." The crowd cheered. But behind the kitchen door, Mila stood, calm, holding her documents close. They had laughed at her. They had looked down on her. They told her to serve and disappear. But they didn't know the house wasn't Terra's. It was hers. She took a deep breath, fixed her hair, and walked toward the party. No one noticed her at first, but they were about to, because the girl they tried to keep hidden was about to shine brighter than anyone in that room. The music was loud. The lights were bright. Laughter filled the big hall of the mansion. Terra was in the middle of the crowd, smiling proudly. He wore a sharp suit, walking around like a king. Everyone was praising him. "Terra, this house is amazing. You've done well for yourself." And he smiled, pretending to be humble. But deep down, he felt untouchable. In the kitchen, Mila stood quietly. Her heart was beating fast. She had finished all the cooking like they asked. She wasn't invited to the party. She wasn't given a dress or even a seat. But tonight, she had something no one could ignore: truth. She opened a small box and pulled out a dress. It was her grandmother's dress. Simple, but beautiful. She wiped her eyes, put it on slowly, and looked in the mirror. Her reflection was calm but powerful. She whispered to herself, "You belong here." As she stepped out of the kitchen, a few people turned, then more and more. The music didn't stop, but it felt like time slowed down. Mila walked down the grand staircase with grace. Her head was high. Her steps were steady. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. Her presence said it all. Gasps filled the room. "Is that Mila? What's she doing here? Why is she dressed like that?" Terra saw her and burst into laughter. "Mila, what's this? You finally lost your mind. This isn't a costume party," he shouted, and people chuckled nervously. But Mila didn't respond. She kept walking, holding an envelope in her hand. When she reached him, she stopped, looked him straight in the eye, then handed him the envelope. "Read it," she said softly. Terra frowned. He opened it, still smirking, but the smile quickly disappeared. His eyes widened. He read it again and again. The laughter around the room faded. The music stopped. People whispered, "What's happening?" Terra's hands began to shake. He looked at Mila in shock. This isn't real," he stammered. Mila turned to the crowd. Her voice was calm but clear. "This house was never his. My grandfather built it. He left it to me. This is the deed. This is the will. Everything here belongs to me." The room froze. No one moved. No one spoke. All eyes were on Mila, the girl they once ignored, the girl they pushed aside, the girl who was told she didn't belong. And now, she was standing in her grandmother's dress, owning the moment and the mansion. Terra looked around for support, but no one said a word. He was exposed, embarrassed, powerless. Mila turned slowly and walked away, leaving silence behind her. The girl they tried to keep in the kitchen just became the queen of the house. There was silence, a heavy, strange silence. No one knew what to say. The same people who laughed at Mila just minutes ago now stared at her like she was someone new, someone powerful, someone important. She stood there in her grandmother's dress, calm and proud, holding the truth in her hand, the deed, the proof. The moment everything changed. Terra still couldn't speak. His face turned red. He looked around, hoping someone would defend him, but everyone stayed quiet. Even the relatives who used to whisper behind Mila's back avoided his eyes. He opened his mouth to talk, but no words came out. Then Mila stepped forward. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. Her voice was soft, but it cut through the room like thunder. "This table," she said, pointing at the big dining table everyone was sitting around. "My grandfather built it, with his hands, with his sweat, for his family. And I am his family." She looked around slowly, meeting the eyes of everyone who once mocked her. "This house," she said, holding the deed up high. "It's mine. He gave it to me, not to show off, but because he believed in me, even when nobody else did." Now, the room was fully focused on her. Some people looked down in shame. Others nodded, surprised by her strength. Then Mila smiled gently and said, "And dinner?" She paused, looked at the fancy dishes on the table, then back at them. "You're welcome. to leave hungry. Boom! The room exploded with gasps. Some people clapped, some stood up, shocked. A few laughed nervously. Others grabbed their bags and quietly walked out, too embarrassed to face her. Those who stayed now looked at Mila with respect in their eyes. She didn't have to raise her voice. She didn't have to fight. Her truth, her calm strength, and her proof were louder than any argument. Terra slowly sat down, defeated. The same house he used to rule over was no longer his kingdom. The girl he treated like a servant just became his landlord. One old uncle whispered to another, "I always knew she was different." Someone else said, "She looks just like her grandmother. Strong." Naledi, Mila's best friend, gave her a proud smile from across the room. Mila stood tall. For years they saw her as the poor girl, the one who didn't belong, the one who was only good enough to serve food and stay silent. But tonight, they saw who she really was, the rightful owner, the true heir, the quiet storm they never saw coming. The girl they laughed at was now the one holding the keys. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need to scream. She just stood in her truth. And in that moment, Mila didn't just get her house back. She got her power, her pride, and the respect she had always deserved. The next morning, the gates of the mansion opened, not for another party, but for lawyers in suits, walking with confidence and carrying documents in leather folders. They weren't there for small talk. They were there for action. Mila stood at the top of the stairs, dressed simply, but with the quiet strength of a queen. No shouting, no drama, just proof. Terra ran toward her, panic in his eyes. "Mila, please, let's talk. We're family." Mila looked at him, calm and steady. "Family?" she asked softly. "You never saw me as family. You saw me as a maid, as a mistake, as someone not worthy to sit at your table." He fell silent. Everyone was watching now. The same people who once laughed with Terra were now watching Mila in fear, unsure what would happen next. She turned to the lawyers. "Please begin." They handed out eviction notices, room by room, guest by guest. The people who mocked her, who told her she didn't belong, now had just days to leave the house they once ruled. Some started crying, others begged, but Mila stayed calm. Her face didn't change. She had cried enough in the past. Today wasn't for tears, it was for truth. Then she turned to Elio, the only one who had helped her from the start. "Elio," she said, "from today, you're the manager of this estate. Make sure everything runs right, with fairness, with order." Elio nodded, proud and serious. The staff who had once ignored Mila now bowed slightly when she passed. Everything had changed. Terra dropped to his knees. "Please, Mila, I made mistakes. Don't do this. I have nowhere to go." Mila's voice was still gentle, but every word hit like a hammer. "You have a mouth to insult, but not a heart to love. You turned your back on me when I had nothing. Now I return the favor, with proof, not pain." She looked him in the eye and said clearly, "From now on, you are tenants in a house you used to mock me in. I will treat you better than you treated me, but the doors of my heart are closed." Gasps, silence, respect. The lawyers continued their work. Mila walked through the halls with grace. No shouting, no revenge speeches, just quiet action. Every paper signed, every door closed, every room claimed back in her name was a reminder that not all battles need noise. Some only need truth, and Mila had it. People in the village heard the story and couldn't believe it. The poor girl who once studied under streetlights was now the landlord of the very people who shamed her. Mila didn't just win. She did it with grace, with power, and with proof, and that made her unstoppable. News spread fast in Aduma Hills. The same town where people once whispered behind Mila's back was now shouting her name with pride. Children ran through the dusty streets yelling, "Mila! Mila! Mila!" as if she were a queen. The market women who once mocked her mother now told stories of how they always knew Mila would be great. Everyone wanted to be close to her now. Mila didn't brag. She didn't change. She still walked with quiet grace, smiling at old neighbors, greeting elders with respect. But one thing had changed. The way they looked at her. Before, they looked down on her, calling her the poor girl with no father. Now, they looked up to her with wide eyes, full of admiration. Invitations started pouring in. The headmistress of the village school begged her to speak to the students. "They need to hear from someone real," she said. "Someone who has walked their path." On the day of her speech, the entire school gathered. Mila stood in front of hundreds of children, most of them barefoot like she once was. She smiled, held the microphone, and said in the simplest voice, "You are not where you come from. You are what you choose to become." The children clapped, some even stood up. A young girl in the front row whispered to her friend, "I want to be like Mila." After the speech, the principal handed Mila a bouquet of flowers. "You've given them something more powerful than money," she said. "You've given them hope." Mila started a scholarship for the smartest girls in town. "No girl with a dream should be left behind," she told the crowd. Parents wept. Some apologized for the way they treated her family years ago, but Mila didn't carry bitterness. She simply nodded and moved forward. Even the mayor invited her for dinner, offering her a seat of honor. He said, "Oduma Hills is proud of you. You're the light of this town." And it was true. From a girl who used to sell oranges by the roadside, Mila had become the wealthiest, most respected woman in Oduma Hills. But more than that, she became a symbol of what was possible, of rising from the dirt without losing your dignity. Everywhere she went, people stopped to wave. Shops printed her picture on posters. Young girls started tying their hair like her. Some even named their newborn daughters Mila. Mila never asked for fame. She only wanted respect. And now, she had both. Not because she shouted or fought, but because she believed in herself when no one else did. The town that once looked down on her now looked up to her. And this was just the beginning. Mila could have shut the doors. She could have built high walls, locked every gate, and kept everyone out. But she remembered how it felt, being told she didn't belong, being laughed at, being pushed aside like she was nothing. So instead of building a wall, Mila did something bigger. She built a longer table. She opened the grand mansion her grandfather left her, not just to live in, but to give others a chance. She turned the back wing of the house into a safe home for young girls who had no place to go. Girls like she once was, poor, overlooked, full of dreams, but with nowhere to rest their heads. Now they had warm beds, books, food, and most of all, someone who believed in them. Mila gave them more than a roof. She gave them hope. Then came the big dinner. Mila didn't just invite rich people or those who now praised her. She invited those who stood by her when she was nothing. Her old school teacher, who once bought her notebooks. The woman who gave her leftover bread when she was hungry. The little girl who shared an umbrella with her during a storm. Elio, the loyal worker who always respected her. She decorated the long dining table herself with flowers and candles. When everyone sat, she stood at the head, dressed simply, glowing with peace. "Tonight," she said with a smile, "no one is a servant. No one is poor. We are all family." Laughter filled the air. Glasses clinked. Plates were passed around. People who had never eaten in such a big house felt welcome, seen, loved. One girl tugged Mila's dress and whispered, "I want to be just like you." Mila knelt and said, "Then never let anyone tell you that you can't." That night, there was no gossip, no jealousy, no pride, just joy, real joy. People left with full bellies and fuller hearts. Outside, they stood under the stars, still talking, still smiling. "That girl Mila," someone said, "she turned her pain into purpose." And that was the truth. Mila didn't rise to show off. She rose to lift others. She didn't use her power to shut doors. She used it to open them wider, because she knew something the world often forgets. Greatness isn't about who sits at the top. It's about who you bring with you when you rise. She could have turned her back, but she turned her mansion into a home for many. She built a longer table, and for the first time in her life, Mila looked around and saw what family should feel like. Not fake smiles, not fancy names, but love, real love. The sun was setting over Oduma Hills, casting a golden glow on the mansion that once felt like a prison to Mila, but not anymore. Today, it was fully hers, not just on paper, but in power, in purpose, and in peace. Mila stood at the front gate with a calm smile on her face. In her hands was a polished brass nameplate. Slowly, with Elio by her side, she screwed it into place. The letters shone brightly under the fading light. Mila House, where everyone deserves a seat. People walking by paused. They read the nameplate. They looked at her. This same girl they once laughed at, ignored, looked down on. And now, they watched in silence, their eyes full of wonder, respect, and maybe a little regret. Inside the mansion, the sounds of laughter and music floated through the air. The girls she took in were dancing in the hallways. Her guests, her real family, were helping clean up after dinner. Nobody barked orders. No one was better than the other. This house had become what it always should have been, a home filled with love, warmth, and kindness. As Mila stepped back and looked at her name on the gate, a voiceover came in, soft but strong. Never forget the ones who tried to dim your light, because one day it will blind them. The camera panned slowly around her, capturing the very place where she had once been told she didn't belong. The same table she was once banned from, she now owned. The same walls that echoed with laughter at her pain now echoed with hope. And as the last light of day touched her face, Mila didn't cry. She didn't shout. She simply smiled because she knew this wasn't just about revenge. It was about rising with grace. She didn't just win. She changed the meaning of legacy.